Good morning. This is going to be a demo of how to get virtualized virtualization, essentially. One of the things I tried to do in class this morning was actually to install Hyper-V in this Windows 10 box that I've got here. I also demonstrated upgrading VMware tools and installing ThinPrint. I won't do those again. I just will point out that more or less how you can do that. The first thing to do as far as ThinPrint is concerned is you have to turn it on globally. It's a preference that you have to turn on. And once you go down here to device, go edit preferences devices, if you click enable virtual printers, then you'll have the option in other VMs to install a virtual printer. Without that, this option isn't even available. It seems to think that I haven't installed my virtual printer yet, but I have. And let me show you that. It was a little weird, honestly, because I tried to install it. And in fact, let me see if it's still visible there. See the DVD, the ISO that it mounts, just like VMware tools. VMware ThinPrint mounts an ISO that you can load. And load the application from that virtual disk. If I were to go into my control panel, actually no, not that, because I have it right here on my start button. If I go into my control panel, and actually let me squish the library pane here for a minute to give this as much room as possible. There, that's better. If I really wanted to maximize this, because I'm not doing anything else right now, so I can even hide my thumbnail bar, but I'll leave it open just for giggles. For some reason, it thinks my Kali is awake. It's not actually. Yeah, it's not. But this is what my Kali VM looked like the last time I used it. It was just sitting at the login screen. Anyway, if I go to Programs and Features, no, not that. Programs. Oh, okay. Okay, I think I better put this back in free stretch because it doesn't know where I am. See, I can see VMware Tools is installed. I can see the virtual printer is installed. If I go to actually control panel items, devices and printers, I can see that I don't have all the printers I have available on the host device. But if I go into the device mangler, which interestingly enough has a list of print queues, all my print queues are here. So it is as if it has worked, but not completely. The place where you would turn that on in a VMware setting is so you kind of have to you install it, you enable it globally, you set it up in your device status to connect it power on. It'll basically use a serial port on the virtual machine to reach through to the end device. One other thing that I want to show y'all before I actually before I show you how to make this possible, I'm going to show you it not working. So going back to Programs and Features, to turn on Hyper-V. Hyper-V is a feature. As I pointed out in class, the Hyper-V Virtual Machine Manager looks surprisingly like, let me move myself a little bit here. Okay, surprisingly like an MMC snap-in. The three column structure of the Microsoft Management Console in all its formats. So in its current form, I can turn on my Hyper-V management tools. So I could talk to a server running Hyper-V, say a server core Hyper-V server. I could talk to one from this box. What I cannot do is turn on the Hyper-V platform. And until that happens, Hyper-V is of no particular use to me. So I'm not even going to do this yet. What you need to do now, and this is something you'll have to shut the OS down in order to do. Go to VM, go to Settings. You're actually going to change your processor. The virtualization engine, there are these three options. Virtualize IOMMU, virtualize CPU performance counters, virtualize Intel VT-X, EPT, or AMD-V. Intel VTX. Those are the the virtualization extensions for Intel CPUs. AMD-V is the same story. Now this is a Core i7 processor. Just for giggles, let's see what it thinks it has. Let's look at the processor here. DXDiag is a pretty useful tool as far as just figuring out what kind of software platform you have, and it actually passes through. It can see Core i7 with 2 CPUs. It sees a VMware BIOS. This is another one of those things where if you say you've got a piece of malware inside your VM that's trying to figure out, hey, am I in a virtual machine? It may look at things like system model, BIOS, things like that, and figure out, hey, I'm not a real computer. It might also look at things like the MAC address. So exit. So obviously I can't do this. What I'm going to do now is shut this thing down. This is the sort of change, like changing the amount of memory in the machine, changing the size of the hard drive. These are things you can only do while the machine is off. So I'm going to go ahead and shut it down and pause this recording. Okay, so the VM is shut down and I can start changing things. So I'm going to go to my processors. I'm going to go to the processor and I'm going to turn on all three of these. I am not going to change the number of cores present. I'm not going to change the number of processors because I don't have 2 processors. If I had any sort of performance issues between this and other VMs, I might dial that number of cores down because this VM really only exists to talk to my vCenter and ESXi hosts for something else I've got going. But it's a good demonstration case for this. So click OK. And I will power it up. And I will keep the aspect ratio because it looks funny. Let's see. I'm going to pause just a minute longer because I don't want to waste time watching this thing boot. Hopefully I'll be able to turn Hyper-V on and do demos of Hyper-V inside a virtualized Windows 10 running on top of VMware. Going down the rabbit hole, as it were. And we're back. Remember, this is Windows 10, so there's a couple of different ways to get to your login screen. One of them, actually let me drag myself over here a little bit. You've got some of your usual stuff. You could hit your Control-Alt-Delete button, which will have the effect of dragging, of doing the screen drag thing. The funny thing is, I'm logging into a domain when my domain controller isn't awake yet. So apparently there's some kind of local account on this thing making that possible. So I'm going to go back to my control panel, not my task mangler, programs and features, and let's see if Hyper-V is now a possibility. And if it is a possibility, I've got some ISOs on another drive I could spin up. Hyper-V. And notice everything is available now. I'm going for the management tools, I'm going for the platform, I'm going for the hypervisor, I'm going for the service. One of the reasons I'm doing this is that my host machine is already running VirtualBox and VMware Workstation. One of the problems I had the other day getting VMware to work was that I had also enabled Hyper-V. And on Windows 10 platforms, if there's Hyper-V and VMware installed at the same time, Windows may prefer to use its own Hyper-V hypervisor instead of VMware Workstation, and that may cause a credential guard, device guard, or are there some other kind of platform incompatibility. So I'm trying to dodge that bullet entirely by creating a platform separate and distinct from VMware where I can use hypervisor, so the Hyper-V hypervisor. Of course, the irony there is that I'm trying to dodge having VMware running the Hyper-V hypervisor instead of its own by running the Hyper-V hypervisor inside of a VMware Type 2. And it's going to reboot the system, and I'm going to pause again to see if I can actually do this. If it is, great. This is actually something we'll deal with starting in, I think, Chapter 5. Yeah, Chapter 5 is working with Microsoft Hyper-V. Chapter 6 is working with the Virtual Machine Manager. So we still have to talk about data center virtualization and cloud computing, but we are going to get to Hyper-V soon. I'm going to pause this and restart. Restart. And, okay, I guess I paused too soon, because one of the things it did was getting Windows ready, which is what it does if you update the OS. So essentially, because this is a feature, because it acts like an OS update, this is the kind of thing you might want to snapshot. Except that it won't really, VMware won't ask you for snapshots at every reboot. That's another indication that, along with the fact that the GUI for Hyper-V looks like the Microsoft MMC, this really is tightly integrated to the OS. It'll be interesting in the future to see how this if this continues to be the case now that Redmond has kind of retrofitted retrofitted parts of Linux into the Windows 10 kernel. There's kind of a sidecar kernel for Linux inside Windows 10 now. So let me pause this a little bit okay. And it rebooted again. I'm hoping that's not a bad sign. Be right back. And it seems to have worked. I'm in my Windows Administrative Tools. I've got the Hyper-V Manager. Double click that. The real acid test will be whether or not I can create a new VM. I'm going to pause this. Let's make this another video because I want to see. So we'll be right back because it's about to kick off the quick create process.